5.3 2003 Chevy Silverado, extended cab, 2-wheel drive, average run-of-the-mill truck. What we're going to be doing today is changing the oil pressure sending unit. That's what feeds it's the sensor that feeds the gauge on the dash for the oil pressure. These trucks, sometimes the oil pressure gauge will flatline at 0, sometimes they'll peg 80, and sometimes they'll twitch. All three of those are common symptoms for the oil pressure sending unit failing, basically. If the motor sounds fine, like it doesn't sound like it's out of oil pressure, it makes a lot of noise. Now, if your gauge flatlines but the engine doesn't make a lot of noise, it's probably your sending unit. That's just the number one thing that usually fails on. So we're going to change the one on this truck. It's pegged at 80 pounds all the time. The gauge reads full max 80 pounds all the time. We didn't necessarily diagnose it. It's a cheap part. It's leaking anyways, so we're going to change it. So right now the truck's not even running and the gauge is already at 80 pounds. Obviously if the engine's not running, there's no way it's producing 80 pounds of pressure. So that's what we're trying to remedy today. Now let's take a look at what we got to work with. What you're looking at is a bone stock, unmodified 5.3 V8 Vortec engine. LS, whatever. Stock truck, it's unmodified. Everything on it is original. So, if you're working with the same thing, you need a couple tools. Alright, so the first thing you gotta do, take the engine cover off. It's 1 bolt, it's an 8mm, 5/16. No big deal. Take that off first. Now we get to see what we're working with. Okay, so the oil sending unit, it's on the very back of the block. It's at the top of the deck, pointing upwards. On the driver's side is where you're going to want to work with this. So, let me get in here. You can actually see the wires. It's kind of hard to see it. I usually use a mirror if you don't know what you're looking for. But there's a cam sensor back here too. You don't want to grab that on accident. When you unplug it, it's going to be a 3-wire sensor like that. Okay. Now I got that hook tool. Depending upon where it lands, it's kind of hard to get your finger on it. Well, if you use a mirror and a light, you can actually see the connector and everything. And now I can get my finger on this one. When I do other cars, other trucks, just depends on how it lands. Sometimes you can't get your finger on it. You get that hook tool right on the back side of the connector. It'll pull right off, no big deal. Just kind of pull it back with the hook and then pull on the wire with the other finger, it'll slide right in. Okay, so what we know now is this is a 2003. It has a 3-wire sensor, okay? It's just a little short one like this. This is out of an 02 off a 6-liter. So depending upon what year of truck you have, what style, what model, what engine, there is going to be discrepancy. It's in the same location. The connector is still attached the same way. This one is a 1-wire sensor. This one's a 3-wire. It's a lot smaller connector. This one's bigger. It's in the same spot. It's just as easy to get to. They use the same socket, but that's why that other socket is so. That socket I have is so deep because it can take this one. Whereas this one you could use a different socket. It's still handle you. But point is, you're looking for one of these depending upon what year truck you have.
That's the new one, right?
This is the new one for this truck, the 2003 with a 5.3 Vortec. So what we got? The oil pressure sensor socket that I said you could pick up at a parts store pretty cheap. The extension. Like I said, mine's a 1/2-inch drive. You can get them in 3/8 and it's fine. I got this to work with. Decent extension. It's like 10 inches or a foot maybe extension, and then a ratchet that's going to work for you. But if you put your hand right through the middle here, you'll feel the sensor and it'll drop right onto it. It's not that hard to get at. You won't be able to see it without a mirror, but it goes on. It drops on there pretty easy. And I already broke it loose. It's just tied up. Now these sensors are not always very tight. They're not a pipe thread fitting like the older style oil pressure sender. They have a brass washer. So once you break them loose, they'll thread out pretty easy. And when you tighten them, it's the same thing. You don't gotta run them in there while it's tight, like you're seating a pipe thread. It's they're just tight enough to crush that copper washer, and that's it. All right, so the old one just hit the floor. The next step, you're gonna wanna make sure your old shit matches your new shit. It's a little off, right? But they're 3 wires. It's the same shit. It's just aftermarket shit. You wanna make sure they match. It's a little taller. It's the same part. They're the same connector. It's just because this one's aftermarket and this one's factory. If I bought a sensor from GM, it'd probably look exactly like this. All right, so we got a new sensor. This part can get tricky because it is buried down in there and you gotta know what you're aiming for. Get your hand way back in there. You can feel the hole with your middle finger. You're lining it up with the other fingers and get it started. You want to go ahead and crank that shit in tight as you can with your hand. Run it down in there. Sometimes they're tight. They do have sealant on the threads. On the new sending units, they always have a little bit of sealant, even though the copper ring, that's its purpose. But they will always put sealant on the threads because of the old-fashioned stuff. They don't want to confuse old guys. You got to keep everything consistent. See, it's got the sealer right there. Don't need that shit. It's not even necessary. That ring right there is what actually seals this. Grab your tools, get your good old, the same socket, same extension, slide back in here, get it dropped down in the same spot, wherever it was. What I like to do is take just the socket, it's real easy to work with, get that thing right in there, give it a little push, kind of tight. Now you can actually see that socket. With that camera, you can actually see that socket right down there. Now you can see it. You know you're on it. It's nice and tight, but you can see it. Now you go ahead and slide this extension on there. You go ahead and get your enormous oversized. Now I'm using a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, not because I'm trying to torque this thing down to 700 foot-pounds. It's because I have a 1/2-inch drive extension, and it makes it easier. Now you start twisting it in, start to tighten up, right? You don't gotta crank this thing down 100 feet. It's not the old style where it's tapered. Give it a little twist, give it an extra twist, a little bit more. Boom, that crushed that washer. That's all you need. But the important thing is you don't need to over tighten that sending unit. It's not like it's not that old style. You tighten it down till it's tight. Give her about a total of maybe a quarter tops. Just kind of feel it. You know, depends on what brand of sending unit you get. Depends on who it comes from. You know, some of them use copper, some of them use a steel, like this double layered looking thing, like the factory one. Just go with what you feel, but don't crank that thing down till it pops. I mean, it'll twist off, and then you got a mess in your hands. So just give it just enough. Know that the washer's seated, and that's really all you got to do. Now, last step. Here's the part where that mirror comes in handy one more time, because you don't know which way that connector's fitting. Now you can stick your hand down there, feel the nub. It's kind of hard to get the connector plugged in because this thing's twisted any which way. You don't know where it landed. So you can take your finger, you feel that nub, you grab that connector, find the nub, grab the connector, the flat piece, the ear, the clip is going to go centered right over there. First of all, find your connector. You grab the clip on it, now you know which way it's facing. Find that nub. Rotate it whatever direction. Boom, she's clipped in, we're done. Oh yeah, well, we're basically done. The sensor's in, connector's plugged in. Now it's just the engine cover, no big deal. Put this shit back on and we'll test it. We'll see if it fixed the problem. got the sender in. Time to see if it works. We're gonna go ahead, put the key in. I'm gonna flip the lights on for you guys. It's a jiggler. Oh, it's a 0 now. Let's go ahead and fire up. There we go. We got 40 pounds of oil pressure at idle. The engine temps at about, you know, what is that, 180? So 40 pounds at idle, that's about right. It used to be 80, pegged all the time. Now, the second thing you want to do, stick your head under the truck and make sure this bitch ain't leaking. Like, well, can't really leaking. That's how you open a Bud Light. Even can open. That's how real men do it. What are we going to talk about? So, the night's over. We got the oil sender in. The oil pressure gauge works now. If you guys want to see some more videos, we're gonna start doing this. We're gonna start making these videos, okay? We're gonna specialize in Chevy Silverados, and we'll go from there. We fix everything, top to bottom, front to back. Mercedes-Benz, European, domestic, imported, don't matter. We fix them all. Well, we started with this one. We need some reviews. You guys like what you saw? Go ahead and leave a comment and let's talk about it. You got any questions? Feel free to ask me. We like questions. I can answer your questions, okay? And click subscribe, okay? We're just starting off right now. At subscribe, I'm gonna keep working on these trucks. Here in about 2 weeks, we're gonna be putting a camshaft in one of these trucks, okay? A performance camshaft. I'm gonna be very detailed about it, and we'll let you know. So stay involved, stay subscribed. When it pops up, watch it. You're gonna like it, okay? That's what we do. Bad Chicken Racing all day. Horsepower, live, love, make horsepower. Yeah, I drank a protein drink once last year, still jacked. Ugh.